The ANC turns 109 years today, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the party is holding its celebrations virtually. The anniversary comes as more people succumb to COVID-19 while the infection rate is soaring. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver his January the 8th statement virtually from Lutuli House in Johannesburg. It's anticipated that he will touch on the economic impact caused by the pandemic, of course the ravages that we've seen caused by COVID-19.
Today marks the ANC's 109th anniversary, but the celebrations have been overshadowed by COVID-19. After the party decided to cancel the celebrations, normally characterized by a large gathering and fanfare. But all eyes will be on ANC President as he delivers his January 8th virtually. COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on the economy and the people of South Africa. Many anticipate that Ramaphosa will touch on the economic recovery plan as well as the country's COVID-19 vaccine strategy.
The promise the last day or so of a vaccine for the health workers, 1.5 million doses, that's the big hope. The next concern would be, how do you get 40 million vaccines into people's arms this year, which is the promise.
The COVID period saw the ruling party come under scrutiny amid personal protective equipment corruption. Analysts say the ANC must root out corruption.
The reason the state is moving on those who are corrupt is showing that we are serious about fighting corruption, even though it's some of its own members.
Yeah.
That is the challenge that one can see. Even with the COVID intervention, 350 rands, they will say we tried our best, but of course it will exhaust, which means they'll have to deal with the explanation of why it is no longer continuing at a certain point.
Yeah.
The ANC says despite a surge in the number of coronavirus infections, it will not support pushing the country into another hard lockdown. This as South Africa recorded over 20,000 infections in the last 24 hours with over 441 deaths. The infection rate continues to soar as authorities call on the nation to observe protocols, wear their masks, wash and sanitize their hands. Notando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, South Africa's COVID economic relief efforts have been drenched in ideological controversy and dogged by corruption as tenders and contracts went to friends and family, and policy issues remain unresolved.
An economic powerhouse on the African continent, South Africa responded to the COVID-19 virus by announcing a strict lockdown and a relief package rather than a stimulus package. Officials in government and beyond estimated the package to be around 500 billion rand, and that is 10% of GDP. No sooner had the two been announced, evidence of wide-scale corruption with regards to the misappropriation of the relief funds by the government and ANC party members emerged. The relief was targeted at the poor. Elites instead misappropriated it. Poverty rose and hunger gnawed, as a humanitarian crisis was barely masked by the lockdown.
We have established in government a collaborative and coordinating center to strengthen the collective efforts among law enforcement agencies so as to prevent, detect, investigate and prosecute COVID-related corruption.
Statistics South Africa registered a deep economic contraction. We shrunk by 51%. The unemployment lines snaked out of the offices of the Unemployment Fund around the country. Deaths piled up, and as South Africa plunged deeper into a lockdown economic depression and into a winter of discontent, economists counted the costs as each sector of the economy was hard hit, save for some, like a portion of the IT sector which registered a COVID windfall. These were the effects of what was dubbed the world's strictest lockdown. The stealing continued unabated, much to the embarrassment of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was elected and rose in the ANC Nasrec conference on a ticket of clean and transparent governance.
And dramatically have been far more effective in controlling the spread of the disease. As a consequence, the National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to enforce a nationwide lockdown for 21 days with effect from midnight on Thursday, the 26th of March. This is a decisive measure to save lives of South Africans from infection and save the lives of hundreds of thousands of our people.
The ANC held hearings of their ethics committee. Their efficacy hangs in the balance, and much remains to be seen. South Africa, under the ruling party, was caught between economic and biological disaster and a deteriorating organizational culture. We sank deeper into an economic depression. NEDLAC convened business, government and labor in an effort to redeem the country. The leaders in NEDLAC emerged last August with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, an infrastructure rollout plan which would absorb many of the unemployed and the jobless. Frequency would be released to unleash economic growth and opportunity. Many more plans were to follow. But the question remains, should the government issue a stimulus package now again? And has the ANC government mismanaged the COVID economy or not? How could we all do better?
All right, and we'll attempt to answer some of those questions tonight before the January the 8th statement delivered by the President. That's coming up at around 7 o'clock. We're looking back specifically at ANC economic policy in light of the ravages of COVID-19. Has the party tried to rise to the occasion, or has it failed? A very crucial test. To discuss tonight, we're joined by Adriaan Saville, who is a professor, economist and founder and chief executive at Cannon Asset Managers, as well as Azar Jammine, who is director and chief economist at Econometrix. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Let me ask you both, starting with you, Adriaan. Before we analyse the ANC, how optimistic or how pessimistic are you right now about the South African economy? I mean, we needed this new variant like a hole in the head. Some economists are talking about 3 years just to get back to where we were before COVID-19 even came. Could it be even worse than that?
I think that 3-year estimate is a reasonable number, that although there could be some bounce depending on the severity of this period that we're in, there could be some bounce in 2021. It remains the case that the South African economy is stuck in a very low growth structural trap. So even if lockdown circumstances were to lift and get us back to level 1 quickly, it's not going to change the fact that we are a 1 or 2% growth economy. And so 3 years to get back to 2019 level of economic activity, I think that that's a reasonable number.
Yeah, and sad. Azar, do you agree?
I do agree with that. One has to bear in mind that the economy was in recession for 3 quarters. That's 9 months prior to the onset of the COVID-19 crisis. And it was in that recession because of a number of structural weaknesses in the economy. And unless those structural weaknesses are put right by the ANC government, led government, we are not going to see economic growth being restored significantly in the longer term. And if you bear in mind that the economy is set to have contracted by somewhere in the order of 7 or 8% in 2020 and could recover by 2 or 3% in the course of 2021, that still leaves another 5 or 6% recovery remaining in 2022 and 2023, and maybe even beyond that, to get to where we were in 2019, a level which was already very depressed, especially when you take into account population growth.
Yeah. And Adriaan, coming back to you, I mean, if there had been a better economic response, could there have been a better outcome? Forget the structural problems before COVID-19. Let's look at how government responded. And of course, we're assessing the ANC here. It is the governing party. Most officials are from the ANC. And the party has supported all the plans laid out by government. Just assess, Adriaan, that response for us.
Well, I think we've got to assess the effectiveness and the delivery of policies, not just by economic growth. You know, that's one barometer. It's a very obvious and immediate barometer. But there are important, arguably more important metrics by which policy should be measured in South Africa, including the redressing of South Africa's deep unemployment burden, especially youth unemployment, entrenched inequality, sagging economic competitiveness. So I think we have to put up that broader canvas to measure the effectiveness of policy. And by that score, the policy delivery over the course of the COVID period, I think leaves much asking. Unemployment has gone deeper. We've had interest rate relief, which perhaps has added 100 or 150 billion to the economy, but that becomes less and less effective as balance sheets that don't carry debt, or simply balance sheets that don't exist, won't benefit from that. There's been some windfall gains. Reference was made in the run-up interview to sectors that have done slightly better than others. Commodity prices recovering has also delivered a windfall gain. But all said and done, it remains the case that when we went into lockdown in March of last year, there was reference to the importance of urgently putting in place these structural reforms. I'm still looking for them. They haven't been delivered yet, and here we are 9 months later.
Yeah. Well, on that score, Adriaan, I mean, if you look at the latest, there was the rescue plan and then the recovery plan. And some people say, look, there's a lot of ideological debate within the ANC and a lot of division. If you look at that recovery plan, it names a lot of the things that have been outstanding for years, things that we've been talking about, like spectrum, maybe ESCOM funding still outstanding, but a crucial oil and mining bill. So that was put there. Was that shrewd on the part of the president and cabinet, maybe to at least bring in all those outstanding issues for years and put them on the table in a plan that everybody rallies around? Or again, are you just not seeing much happening despite that?
Well, we've been told that the spectrum release happens in March, and that will be welcomed. Now, I've been in conversations where reference has been made by analysts. Please don't mention spectrum. You've been talking about it for so long. We don't need to hear about it again. So there really is, fatigue with the promises, and the policy ambition is solid. It's sensible policy. But we need to get out of the industry of talking about this policy and into the practice of delivering on it. The lockdown circumstances provide I think, a ripe environment to square up to hard decisions. And some of those decisions do require a determination. They aren't all win-win outcomes. But there certainly are some win-win outcomes, and the release of spectrum and the delivery of renewable energy are arguably two very obvious win-win outcomes that could present material gains to the South African economy in 2021.
Yeah. Azar, do you see that there is clear policy coming through, maybe implementation still a problem? Because if you look at some of the reporting back over COVID-19, looking at perhaps some of the divisions within the ANC. An example is the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, saying we're going to the IMF and the World Bank. They've got a good deal. It won't affect our sovereignty. And he was criticized by Ace Magashule, the Secretary General of the ANC. So do you think those divisions have been overstated, or are they hamstringing the governance of South Africa to some extent?
I think it's not to some extent, to a very great extent, those divisions are hamstringing the ability of government to implement its policies. And it goes way beyond the clash between the Treasury and the radical economic transformation faction of the ANC. It goes to the whole question also of corruption and whether indeed the government is able to deal with it. There have been significant encouraging developments in the last few months in that regard, but people are still waiting to see people actually having to account and possibly having to go to prison on the grounds of being corrupt. It is a slow process and people are getting very frustrated about it. The same goes with infrastructural investment. The government has got together with the private sector and through NEDLAG to decide on a program of 51 various infrastructural investment projects. Something extremely encouraging to see the government and the private sector moving together for a change. But as Adriaan mentioned at the start, we are still waiting to see these being rolled out in practice. The same thing goes for the privatization, getting strategic equity partners to buy out some of the stakes in state-owned enterprises to enhance accountability and oversight of these enterprises. We're still waiting to see whether that actually comes to pass and whether the alternative factions within the ANC actually allow such measures to be taken. But yes, there have been a few very, very important ideas that have been placed on the table by none other than President Ramaphosa himself in his recovery plan. But at the moment, it's a wait-and-see game, as it has been for the last 3 years of the Ramaphosa regime.
All right, please both stay with us. We're going to take a quick ad break and we'll continue this discussion about economic policy, economic performance of the ANC. I'd like to talk about education and health, that coming up.